fluorescent lights in the courtroom had that particular quality that makes everyone look slightly ill. My daughter sat across the aisle in a blazer I'd never seen before. New, expensive, the kind of thing you buy when you want to look credible. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her lawyer was already shuffling papers when the judge walked in. I'd been in that building once before, 30 years ago, for a speeding ticket. I never thought I'd be back to defend my own mind. The judge, a woman somewhere in her 50s, grey at the temples, reading glasses low on her nose, reviewed the documents in front of her for a long moment before she looked up. "Mr. Caldwell." She was looking at me. "Is the petition before this court an accurate representation of your current mental state?" My lawyer, a compact man named Philip, who charged $340 an hour and was worth every cent, started to rise. The judge held up one finger without looking at him. He sat back down. "I'd like to hear from Mr. Caldwell directly." I straightened in my chair. My left knee ached the way it always does in air conditioning, a souvenir from a construction site accident in 1987 that never fully healed. I thought about that for half a second, about all the years that knee had carried me. And then I spoke. "Your Honor, I am 67 years old. I ran a plumbing supply business for 24 years. I sold it in 2019 for $1.4 million, paid my taxes, invested what was left, and have managed my own finances every day since. Last spring I had a mild stroke. I spent 11 days in the hospital. During those 11 days, my daughter and her husband did not visit once. They were in Cancun." I paused. "I believe the court has their social media posts in evidence." The judge looked at the documents. Something shifted in her expression. She turned to my daughter's table. Ms. Aldridge, or rather, Mrs. Hartley. Your petition claims your father is incapable of managing his financial affairs. Is that your position?" My daughter, Renee, 41 years old, my only child, finally looked at me. There was something in her face I hadn't seen before. Not guilt exactly, more like the expression of someone who has made a calculation and is no longer certain the math was right. Her lawyer stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Caldwell recently amended his estate documents in ways that suggest I'm asking your client." Renee stood slowly. She smoothed her blazer. "Dad has been making some decisions lately that concern us. The changes to his will, the transfer of funds to a charitable trust that I established," I said, before Philip could stop me. "Legally, with full counsel, 4 months ago, Mr. Bress Caldwell." The judge's voice wasn't unkind, but it was firm. "Your attorney will have an opportunity to respond." I nodded and sat back. What I didn't say, what Philip had advised me not to say, not yet, was the rest of it. The $4,200 a month I'd been sending Renee and her husband Garrett since 2021. The $307,000 down payment on their house in Scottsdale. The $38,000 I'd paid off on Garrett's business loans when his landscaping company hit trouble. The $14,000 in credit card debt I'd cleared without being asked, because Renee had mentioned offhandedly that they were a little stretched. All of it gone. And when I called from a hospital bed with tubes in my arm, I got a voicemail. "Dad, we just landed. The resort is beautiful. I'll call you tomorrow. Love you." She did not call the next day, or the day after. My neighbor Helen, a 72-year-old retired school principal who has known me since my wife Barbara passed. She's the one who called the hospital. She's the one who sat with me while the neurologist explained what had happened and what needed to happen next. She drove me to my follow-up appointments. She picked up my prescriptions. When Renee finally called, 8 days after my stroke, I was already home. She didn't know I'd been discharged. She thought I was still in the hospital. "Dad, how are you feeling?" "We got back yesterday. The flight was awful. Garrett's absolutely exhausted." I'd held the phone away from my ear and looked at the ceiling of my living room, at the water stain in the corner that I'd been meaning to fix for 2 years, at the ceiling fan Barbara had picked out from a catalog in 2003, the one with the dark wood blades she said reminded her of the house she grew up in. "I'm fine," I told my daughter. And then I called my daughter. And then I called my attorney, The judge denied the petition in under 10 minutes. "Mr. Caldwell is clearly competent," she said, and the words landed in the room like something solid. "The evidence presented does not meet the legal standard for a guardianship proceeding. Furthermore, the timing and apparent motivation of this petition, filed 6 weeks after Mr. Caldwell amended his estate documents, raises serious questions." She looked at my daughter's lawyer over her reading glasses. "And awarding attorney's fees to the respondent, $9,500, to be paid within 45 days. Renee made a sound. I couldn't describe it exactly. Like something small being stepped on. Philip shook my hand at the plaintiff's table. Across the room, Garrett was already on his phone. He hadn't spoken once during the entire hearing. In the 3 years I'd known him as my son-in-law, I'd noticed he rarely spoke when Renee was in charge of a situation. He just followed. In the hallway outside, Renee caught up with me before I reached the elevator. "Dad, I think we've said enough for today." I pressed the button. "You have to understand we were worried. We just wanted to make sure you were protected, Renee." I turned and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. She had her mother's eyes, dark brown, expressive, and absolutely none of her mother's wisdom about when to stop talking. "You filed a legal document claiming I was mentally incompetent while I was recovering from a stroke that you found out about from Helen, not from any call you made yourself." The elevator opened. "We'll talk when I'm ready. Right now I'm not." I stepped in. The doors closed. Helen was waiting in the parking lot with the engine running because Helen understands that when a person has been through something difficult, what they need is a car with heat and no questions. She handed me a coffee from the cup holder. She pulled out of the lot. "Well," she said after we'd gone 2 blocks. "We won." She nodded once, the kind of nod that means "of course you did," and kept driving. My phone started ringing before we got back to my neighborhood. Renee, then Garrett, then Renee again. Then a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be Garrett's sister, who had apparently been recruited as reinforcement. I declined them all and turned the volume down. By evening, I had 23 missed calls. Not 87, my daughter is persistent but not unhinged, at least not yet. 23 calls and 11 text messages, ranging from "Dad, please pick up" to "This is not what we wanted to." Finally, from Garrett, "Renee is really upset. Can you call her?" I saved everything to a folder on my phone. Philip had told me to document. I documented. I sat in my living room that night in the chair Barbara always said was too ugly to keep, and I was too stubborn to throw out. And I thought about the years. Renee had been a good kid, a genuinely good kid. She'd been kind to animals. She'd visited her grandmother every Sunday without being asked. She'd called me from college just to check in. I don't know exactly when the shift happened. Sometime after she met Garrett, sometime after the money started flowing, sometime after comfort became expectation, and expectation became something closer to entitlement. Or maybe I'd missed something earlier. Maybe I'd let her down in ways I couldn't see clearly. I didn't know. I still don't, but I knew what I'd seen in that hospital room, which was my neighbor, not my child, holding a cup of ice chips and asking the nurse what the follow-up protocol was going to be. The 45-day deadline on the attorney's fees came and went. Philip called to tell me they hadn't paid. "Not surprised," I said. "We can file for collection. Wage garnishment, liens on property. The house is in both their names, so there are some interesting avenues. Let it sit for now," I said. "I want to see what they do next." What they did next I found out from my grandson, Renee's son from her first marriage. Tyler was his name in my records, but I realized I should not use that name here. The boy I mean is 14. Quiet, serious in the way that boys get when they've spent too many years watching adults behave badly. He called me on a Sunday afternoon, which he almost never does. "Grandpa." His voice was careful, like he was choosing each word. "Mom's been different lately, more stressed. They've been arguing a lot at night." "About what, do you know?" "Money, I think. And about you, Dad, Garrett. He said something a few days ago. He said they made a mistake." A pause. Mom got really angry when he said that. "How are you doing, son?" "I'm okay. Can I come over sometime? You said you teach me how to fish off the dock. Any time you want, any time at all. What I didn't tell him was that I'd already heard through Philip that they'd listed the house. Not sold, listed. At $599,000, which was $60,000 under what the market might have supported 6 months ago, suggesting some urgency. The mortgage on that house was $2,900 a month. With my $4,200 lards gone and Garrett's landscaping business still limping, the math didn't work. It had never worked, I realized. I'd just been the variable that kept the equation balanced. 3 weeks after the listing went up, I got a call from a number I recognized as the landline of a woman named Carol Whitfield, Garrett's mother, a decent woman from Flagstaff whom I'd met twice at family events, and who had clearly been asked to make this call by her son. Eugene, she said. That's my name, Gene, to most people. Eugene on legal documents and apparently to mothers-in-law I barely know. I hope you're well. I wanted to reach out because I think there's been some misunderstanding. And I know Renee and Garrett would love to sit down with you and... Carol, I said, I appreciate you calling. I know this isn't easy for you, but whatever conversation happens between me and my daughter needs to happen directly. I'm not going to negotiate through intermediaries. A pause. Of course, I understand. Tell Garrett he can call me himself. If he wants to talk, I'll listen. Garrett calls the next morning. I wasn't surprised. Renee would have pushed him to use Carol first, and when that didn't work, she'd have pushed him to call directly. Renee has always operated through other people when she's not sure of her footing. He sounded tired, not performed tired, genuinely exhausted in the way that people get when they've been fighting the same argument every night for weeks. Gene, he said, I owe you an apology. Not for the legal stuff. That's Renee's to explain. But for not being a better son-in-law, for not pushing back sooner, for taking what you offered without thinking hard enough about what it meant. I sat with that for a moment. The petition was Renee's idea, I asked. She thought. He stopped. Started again. She was scared. About the will change. She didn't talk to me first. When she did tell me, the paperwork was already filed, and I should have another stop. I should have told her to pull it. I didn't. That's on me too. Why didn't you? A long pause. Because I've been letting her make decisions for a long time, he said finally, and at some point, I stopped noticing that some of them were wrong. I looked out my window at the yard. There's a bird feeder out there that Barbara put up in 2011, and I've been filling every week since she died. There's something steadying about a thing that needs to be done regularly. You don't have to decide whether to do it. You just do it. Garrett, I said, I'm not ready to have a family dinner. I'm not ready to act like the last few months didn't happen, but I'm willing to hear what you and Renee are actually going to do differently when you figure that out. Not what you're planning to do, what you're doing. Show me the action. That's fair. The house sold yet? Under contract. Close in 3 weeks. And then what? Smaller place. Rent probably for a while. I can't believe I'm saying that at 44, but... He gave a short, humorous laugh. Renting sounds pretty good compared to the alternative. It's not the worst thing, I said. Some of the best decisions I made were the ones where I had less than I thought I needed and had to figure it out. The house closed. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Mesa, and whatever I felt about that, it wasn't satisfaction exactly. It was more like watching a fever break, uncomfortable to witness, but necessary. The body doing what it had to do. What I heard from my grandson in the weeks that followed was quieter than before. Less fighting. Garrett had picked up a contract with a commercial property management company. Steady work. Less seasonal than residential landscaping, better margins. Renee had gone back to the real estate license she'd gotten years ago and let lapse. She was hosting open houses on weekends. I heard all of this secondhand through a 14-year-old who shouldn't have had to be my source of information about my own family. But that's what we'd come to. The call I was waiting for took 6 weeks. Renee called on a Tuesday morning. Not a text, Not through Garrett, not through Carol. She called herself, and I answered. She was quiet for a moment after I picked up. Then, "Hi, Dad. Hi, Renee." Another silence. I let it sit. "I don't know how to start this," she said. "The beginning is usually fine. A small sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something else. The beginning is where I did everything wrong. I didn't disagree, but I didn't pile on either. I've been thinking about the hospital," she said, "about not coming, about—" Her voice shifted slightly, the way a voice does when someone is trying to hold something steady. I told myself we couldn't get refunds on the resort booking, that it was only 11 days, that you were going to be fine anyway. I had a lot of reasons. She stopped. "They were all excuses." "Yes," I said, "they were. Dad, I'm—" Another stop. "I'm not going to say I was just scared about the will. That's what the lawyer said to say in the petition, but the truth is I was also scared about losing you, and I handled being scared in the worst possible way. I listened to my daughter tell me the truth, finally, and I thought about Barbara, about what she would have said. Barbara was always better at forgiveness than I was, quicker to it, more graceful. She used to say that holding a grudge was like carrying a stone in your shoe. Doesn't hurt the stone. But Barbara also used to say that forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting, that you could love someone and still make clear that certain things were not acceptable. "Renee," I said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to think before you answer." "Okay, if I'd never had that stroke, if things had just continued the way they were, do you think you would have changed anything?" A very long silence. "No," she said quietly. "Probably not." I respected that. It would have been easy to say the right thing. She didn't. She said the true thing. "Then the stroke did something useful," I said. "I'm not glad it happened. But I'm not sorry for what came after. Are you ever going to change the will back?" And there it was. Even now, even in the middle of something that felt like a genuine reckoning, the question surfaced. I almost couldn't blame her for asking it. At least she asked it directly. "No," I said. "I set up the charitable trust because it felt right, not as a punishment. The trust supports a housing assistance program in Phoenix. I'm proud of it. That's not going to change." Renee was quiet again. "But," I said, "that doesn't mean there's nothing for you. I've talked with Philip about a specific provision for my grandson's education, direct to him, not through you. And if your behavior over the next year or two reflects the person I raised rather than the one I've been dealing with, there may be more conversation to have." "What would that look like? Behaving well enough?" "Show up," I said simply. "When I call, answer. If something happens to me, medically, anything, you come. Not after the resort checkout. You come. And you do that because I'm your father, not because of what might be in a document someday. I can do that. Start now, then. Come for dinner on Sunday. Bring my grandson. We'll have something normal." A pause then. "Just us? Or Garrett too?" "Start with just the two of you. Garrett and I have our own conversation to have, separately, one thing at a time." Sunday came around gray and cool. The kind of November afternoon that settles over Phoenix like a borrowed sweater. Renee brought a casserole she'd made from scratch, which surprised me. She didn't used to cook. It was a little oversalted, but I ate 2 helpings and didn't say a word about the salt. My grandson, I'll call him Oliver here, though that's not quite right either, spent most of the afternoon in the driveway with me, where I'd been sorting through a collection of old hand tools I'd inherited from my own father. Socket sets, ratchets, screwdrivers still in their original cases. Good tools from the 1970s, made when things were made to last. "What are these worth?" he asked, turning a 3-10H drive socket wrench in his hands. "Financially, probably not much. The kind of worth that matters? Quite a lot." He considered it with the seriousness of a 14-year-old who's been through more than 14-year-olds should have to go through. "Grandpa," he said, setting the wrench down carefully, "is everything going to be okay? With you and Mom?" I thought about the honest answer, about how to give it to a boy who deserved the truth without giving him more weight to carry. "It's getting better," I said. That's real. Whether okay is where it ends up, I can't promise. But better is something. He nodded, the way kids nod when they understand more than you've said. Inside, Renee was washing the casserole dish. I could hear the water running. I stood in the driveway for a moment longer, looking at my father's tools spread out on an old blanket, and I thought about the nature of inheritance. What we pass down, what we receive, what we squander, what we don't deserve and get anyway, and what we don't deserve and lose. Barbara and I raised Renee with too much cushion, maybe. We wanted her life to be easier than ours had been, a natural enough thing for parents to want. And we overcorrected, gave her a softness that became a kind of brittleness. Things she hadn't earned, she hadn't learned to value. Things she hadn't struggled for, she didn't know how to hold. That wasn't entirely Renee's fault. I could see that now. But it wasn't something I could keep enabling either. The kindest thing I'd done for my daughter in years might have been the thing that felt cruelest, cutting the cord and watching her learn to stand without it. Helen came by the following week with a pot of chicken and dumplings and the opinion, delivered calmly over my kitchen table, that I'd handled things about as well as a person could handle them. "You're being generous," I said. "I'm being honest. There's a difference. You've been more family to me this year than my actual family." She shrugged, the way people do when they're uncomfortable being told something true. "You'd have done the same for me." "I'd like to think so." We sat with that for a while, with the chicken and dumplings, in the particular comfortable silence of two people who've known each other long enough not to need to fill it. "Do you think she'll really change?" Helen asked eventually. I thought about Sunday. About the slightly over-salted casserole made from scratch. About Renee standing at the sink with her sleeves rolled up, washing a dish she brought into my house. "I think she's trying," I said. "Whether trying turns into changing, that's the part I can't control. And I've learned this year that trying to control the things I can't is a very efficient way to exhaust yourself." Helen raised her mug in something like a toast. "To efficient living, then." "Then. To knowing what you can and can't fix," I said, "and doing the work on the things you can." I turned 68 in February, the first birthday since Barbara died that Renee actually called before noon. She called at 9:17 in the morning. Before I'd even had my second cup of coffee, my grandson sent a text with a photograph attached, a picture he'd taken of the two of us in the driveway with the old tools, both of us squinting a little into the afternoon light, grinning at something I can't remember now. I set it as the wallpaper on my phone. Garrett came to the house in March. He brought a bag of bagels, which is what you bring when you're a 44-year-old man and you want to make a gesture, but you're not sure yet what kind of gesture is appropriate. We sat at my kitchen table and we talked for 2 hours about nothing in particular. His landscaping contract, a book I'd been reading, the bird feeder, the state of the Diamondbacks, which we agreed was dire. At the end of it, he shook my hand at the door. "Thank you for the time," he said. "Don't thank me for the time," I said. "Just keep using it right." He nodded. Got in his truck. Drove away. I don't know what the next year looks like. I don't know if Renee will hold to what she's started, or if some future pressure, financial, emotional, some new temptation, will pull her back toward old patterns. I don't know if Garrett will keep choosing his own judgment over defaulting to whoever is loudest in the room. I don't know if my grandson will grow up understanding that love is a verb, not a transaction. I hope so. I'm investing in that hope without guaranteeing the return. What I do know is this. The $9,500 in attorney's fees was eventually paid. It came in the form of a cashier's check delivered through Philip's office. No note attached. Philip called to confirm receipt, and I told him to deposit it and forget it. "You're not curious what they had to do to get that together?" he asked. "I know what they had to do," I said. "They had to figure it out themselves. That's exactly what I wanted. The charitable trust is fully established. There's a family in Phoenix, a mother, 2 kids recently left a difficult situation, living in a place they can afford because of it. They don't know my name. I don't know theirs. That's how it's supposed to work. Some evenings I sit in Barbara's chair, Still ugly, still keeping it. And I look out at the bird feeder, and I think about what it costs to let people find their own bottom, and what it costs to keep catching them before they get there. I spent a long time confusing rescue with love. I know better now. It doesn't mean I don't worry about Renee. I'm her father. I'll worry about her until I don't have the capacity to worry anymore. But there's a difference between worry and enabling. There's a difference between being a safety net and being the floor. I spent 24 years building a business from nothing, and the most important thing I learned wasn't about plumbing supply or inventory margins or vendor contracts. It was that you have to let people, employees, partners, family, feel the real consequences of their real choices, not to punish them, to give them the chance to become the people they're capable of being. Some of them surprise you. I'm waiting to see if my daughter will. If you found this story worth your time, I'm glad. Leave a comment telling me what you would have done differently, because this wasn't a simple situation, and I know I didn't get all of it right either. Subscribe if you want to hear where this one goes from here, and if you know someone carrying something like this, a parent, a friend, someone who's been giving until it hollowed them out, share this with them. Sometimes it helps just to know someone else has been in the same room and found their way out. There's something I didn't fully understand until I was 67 years old, lying in a hospital bed with a neurologist explaining what a stroke does to the brain, while my neighbor Helen sat in the chair next to me and my daughter was poolside in Cancun. What I didn't understand was this. The way people treat you in your worst moment is not an accident. It's a result. Everything that led to that moment, every choice you made, every boundary you didn't draw, every check you wrote when you should have said no, it all accumulates, quietly, over years, until one day you're in a hospital gown watching your phone and the call doesn't come. I spent a long time after Barbara died trying to hold the family together with money. I told myself it was love. And part of it was, but part of it was also easier than the harder thing, which was having honest conversations about expectations and limits and what it actually means to show up for someone. I avoided those conversations. I wrote checks instead, and in doing so I taught Renee, without ever saying a word, that my love was something you accessed through a bank account. That's on me. I own that. But here's what I've come to believe, and it didn't come from a book or a sermon. It came from watching my daughter sit across a courtroom aisle in a blazer she bought to look credible while claiming her own father was mentally unfit. People do not grow when they are comfortable. They grow when they are uncomfortable, and they cannot escape it. When I stopped the monthly payments, when I established the charitable trust, when I let the legal process play out, I was not punishing Renee. I was, for the first time in years, treating her like an adult, holding her accountable for her choices the way the real world does, the way I'd been shielding her from for far too long. Garrett paying for bagels and sitting at my kitchen table for 2 hours, talking about nothing in particular that mattered more to me than any apology speech, because it was a choice. Nobody told him to come. There was nothing in it for him financially. He came because it was right. That's the difference between character and compliance. Character is what you do when no one's rewarding you for it. And Renee calling at 9:17 on my birthday, before I'd had my second cup of coffee, before the day had given her any reason to perform, that was something too. Small, but real. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust her the way I did before. That particular trust, once it's been cracked open the way mine was, doesn't just seal back up. But I believe in a person's capacity to become better than they've been. I've seen it in business, in employees who failed badly and came back stronger for it, in partnerships that fractured and were rebuilt with better foundations. I believe in that capacity, in Renee, even now. Maybe especially now. What I know for certain is that the version of me who kept writing checks, who kept absorbing disappointment quietly, who kept telling himself it was fine, that version of me was not doing anyone any favors. Not Renee, not my grandson, not myself. The kindest thing I ever did for my family was the thing that looked the cruelest from the outside. I stopped catching them. I let them land. And in the landing, something shifted. Some things only become possible after they break.